I looked at my mother, standing on my front porch in a dress that was 2 sizes too big for her shrinking frame, and I felt nothing but disgust. She was trembling, her skin was pale, almost translucent. Her eyes had that glassy, distant look that I had come to hate. And when she reached out to hand me a wedding gift, a small, poorly wrapped box, I saw the bruises on the inside of her elbows. I saw the track marks. I didn't take the gift. Instead, I said the words that have replayed in my head every single night for the last 6 months. I said, "You are not coming to the wedding, Mom. I don't want a junkie in my photos. Go home. And don't contact me until you are clean." She didn't argue, she didn't scream, she didn't try to defend herself. She just looked at me with a sadness that seemed ancient, placed the gift on the porch railing, and walked away. She walked with a limp, her shoulders hunched, looking like a ghost haunting the daylight. That was the last time I saw her alive. 3 weeks later, she was found dead in her apartment. I told myself I wouldn't cry. I told myself that this was inevitable, that when you choose drugs over your own family, this is how the story ends. I went to the coroner's office to identify the body with a sense of righteous anger. I was ready to close the book on the chaotic, embarrassing chapter of my life that was my mother. But when the coroner handed me the report, when he sat me down and explained exactly why my mother died, the floor dropped out from under me. She didn't die of an overdose, there were no narcotics in her system, there wasn't a drop of alcohol. My mother died of multi-organ failure caused by extreme chronic exhaustion and the long-term effects of experimental clinical trials. The track marks on her arms weren't from heroin. They were from needles, yes, but not the kind you buy on the street. They were from the needles of pharmaceutical companies, blood banks, and research labs. For 20 years, my mother had been using her body as a biological ATM machine. She had been selling her blood, her plasma, and her health, piece by piece, to pay for my life. And I treated her like garbage for it. If you have ever judged a parent for being absent, for looking sick, or for not being normal, you need to stop what you are doing and listen to this. Please hit that subscribe button, because I am going to confess the greatest sin of my life in the hopes that it saves you from making the same mistake. To understand how I got it so wrong, you have to understand the picture I built in my head. I grew up in a household that felt like a sinking ship. My father died when I was 4, it was just me and Mom, but Mom was different. Other moms baked cookies, other moms were the team moms at soccer practice, other moms had energy. My mom was a ghost, she slept all the time. I would come home from school at 3 p.m. and she would be passed out on the couch, wrapped in 3 blankets, shivering even in the summer. When she was awake, she was groggy, she moved slowly, she forgot things, she would lose her train of thought in the middle of a sentence. And then there were the disappearances. Every few months she would vanish for a weekend. She would drop me off at my Aunt Linda's house and say she had a work trip. But she didn't have a job, at least not a real one. She cleaned houses sometimes, but that wouldn't require overnight trips. When she came back from these trips, she looked terrible, pale, nauseous. Sometimes she would vomit for days. She would have bandages on her arms, bruises on her neck. I was young, but I watched TV. I knew what those signs meant. I asked my Aunt Linda once, "Is Mom sick?" Aunt Linda just pursed her lips and looked away. She said, "Your mother does what she has to do, don't ask questions." That silence confirmed it for me, it was a secret. And in families like ours, secrets usually meant addiction. I started to resent her. I started to hate the poverty, the secrecy, the shame. But the confusing part, the part that I couldn't reconcile, was the money. We lived in a crappy apartment, yes, but whenever I really needed something, the money would miraculously appear. When I was 10, I was diagnosed with severe asthma. The inhalers were expensive, we didn't have insurance. I remember hearing her cry on the phone to the pharmacy. Then she disappeared for 3 days. When she came back, she looked like death, she could barely stand. But she handed me a bag from the pharmacy with 3 months' worth of inhalers. She said, "I picked up some extra shifts cleaning, we are good." When I was 16, I wanted to go on the class trip to Washington, D.C. It cost $500. I knew we didn't have it. I didn't even ask. But the day the payment was due, she handed me an envelope with $500 in cash. Her hands were shaking as she handed it to me. She had a bandage on her neck. She said she burned herself with a curling iron. I took the money. I didn't say thank you. I looked at her shaking hands and thought, she is high right now. I spent my teenage years building a case against her. I tracked her moods. I tracked her physical decline. I convinced myself that she was a high-functioning addict who was wasting her life while I tried to build mine. I became obsessed with being the opposite of her. I was disciplined, I was clean, I was ambitious. I got a scholarship to a university 3 states away. The day I left for college, she tried to hug me. She looked so frail. She was only 45, but she looked 60. Her skin was gray, her hair was thinning. I pulled away from her hug. I said, "Make sure you pay the rent, Mom. Don't spend my financial aid money on your habits." She flinched like I had slapped her. She whispered, "I would never take from you, David. Everything I do is for you." I rolled my eyes. I got in my car and I drove away. I felt free. I graduated. I got a job in corporate sales. I made good money. I met a wonderful woman named Sarah. We got engaged. I told Sarah about my mother. I told her the tragedy of growing up with an addict. Sarah was sympathetic. She said, "We have to set boundaries. We can't let that chaos into our lives." So I set boundaries. I stopped answering her calls. I visited once a year for Christmas, stayed for 2 hours, and refused to eat the food she cooked because I thought her kitchen was unsanitary. Then came the wedding. I sent her an invite, but I added a note: sobriety required. She called me. She sounded weak. She said, "David, I am not on drugs. I have never been on drugs. I am sick." I laughed, the classic addict denial. I said, "Mom, stop lying. I have seen the needles. I have seen the bruises. Just tell the truth for once." She went silent. Then she said, "Okay, I won't come. I'll just bring a gift by the house." And that brings us back to the porch, the rejection, the walk of shame, and the death. Now, let me tell you what I found in her apartment after the funeral. I went there to clean it out. It was cleaner than I expected, but it was empty. She had almost no possessions, no TV, no computer, just books and clothes. I found a box in her closet. It was marked medical. I thought, here it is, the proof. I opened it. It wasn't drugs, it was paperwork. Thousands of pages of paperwork. I started reading, and as I read, the air left the room. These were consent forms, informed consent forms for Phase 1 clinical trials. Study 402B high-dose antiviral testing. Risks: nausea, organ damage, fatigue, compensation $2,500. Study 909 experimental hypertension drug. Risks: dizziness, fainting, cardiac arrhythmia, compensation $1,800. Plasma donation log frequency twice weekly, cumulative donations 800. I looked at the dates. The date of the antiviral study, the one with the organ damage risk, was the exact same week she bought my asthma inhalers when I was 10. The date of the hypertension study, the one that caused dizziness, was the week she gave me the money for the Washington, D.C. trip. There were receipts stapled to the forms. Receipt for David's braces, paid in cash. Receipt for David's textbooks, paid in cash. Receipt for David's car insurance, paid in cash. I dug deeper. I found a letter from a doctor dated 5 years ago. "Dear Ms. Miller, we strongly advise you to stop participating in these high-risk trials. Your liver enzymes are elevated and your kidney function is declining. Your body cannot handle the stress of these experimental compounds anymore. Continued participation could be fatal." Stapled to that letter was a receipt for my college tuition deposit. She didn't stop. She was selling her body, not in the way people usually mean. She was selling her biology. She was letting companies test risky, unproven drugs on her because it paid fast cash, and she needed cash to keep me alive and successful. The highs I saw, that was her body reacting to experimental chemicals. The withdrawals, that was her recovering from the side effects. The bandages, the track marks, that was from IVs and blood draws. She wasn't an addict, she was a lab rat. She was letting them poison her just a little bit at a time so that I could have straight teeth, so that I could have asthma medicine, so that I could go to college. I sat on the floor of her bedroom and I screamed. I screamed until my throat bled. I remembered every cruel thing I said to her. "Oh, you're lazy. You look disgusting. Put a sweater on, you look like a junkie." She was cold because she was anemic from giving so much blood. She was tired because her organs were shutting down from processing toxins. She took every insult, she took every rejection, and she never told me. Why didn't she tell me? I found a journal entry in the bottom of the box that explained it. David looked at me with such hate today. He thinks I'm high. It hurts so much. But it is better this way. If he knew where the money came from, he wouldn't take it. He is too proud. He would feel guilty. He would worry about me. I want him to fly. I don't want him weighed down by worrying about his mother's health. Let him hate me. As long as he takes the check, as long as he succeeds, my body is just a vessel. I will use it up to fill his sails. She let me hate her to protect my conscience. She allowed herself to be the villain of my story so that I could be the hero of mine without guilt. She walked to her death, alone, misunderstood, labeled a junkie by her own son, and she did it willingly. I looked at the wedding gift she had left on the porch. I hadn't opened it. I had thrown it in the trunk of my car. I ran out to the car. I tore the box open. Inside was a vintage watch. It was my grandfather's watch. She had pawned it 10 years ago when I needed money for a laptop. There was a receipt inside. She had bought it back. It cost $1,200. And next to the receipt was a payment stub from a clinical trial center, dated 2 weeks ago. Study 712, bone marrow harvest, compensation $1,500. She had sold her bone marrow, a painful, grueling procedure. She did it in her fragile, dying state. Just to buy back my grandfather's watch, just to give me a wedding gift. That was why she looked so weak on the porch. She was recovering from a bone marrow extraction. And I told her to get off my property. I fell to my knees in the driveway holding that watch, and I wished that the earth would swallow me whole. I wished I could trade places with her. I am a murderer. I didn't pull a trigger, but I killed her spirit. I killed her joy, and I let her die alone thinking her sacrifice meant nothing. I am sharing this story because I know I am not the only one. We live in a world that is quick to judge. We see a woman who looks disheveled, who looks sick, who acts erratic, and we label her. We say addict. We say crazy. We say lazy. But we don't know the story. We don't know what happens behind closed doors when a mother is desperate to provide for her child. There is no limit to what a mother will do. She will walk through fire. She will starve. She will literally sell the blood from her veins. And often, the only thanks she gets is judgment. I can never fix this. I can never apologize. I have to live the rest of my life knowing that the beautiful house I live in, the degree on my wall, the very air in my lungs, it was all paid for with her pain. But you still have time. If you have a parent who seems off, if you have a parent who is secretive, if you have a parent who looks tired all the time, don't assume the worst. Sit them down, look them in the eye, ask them, Mom, Dad, are you okay, really okay? Don't let your pride or your judgment build a wall between you. Because you have no idea what they might be enduring just to see you smile. My mother wasn't an addict, she was a martyr. She was the strongest person I have ever known, and I was too blind to see it until she was in the ground. Don't be like me. Please, if this story touched you, share it. Share it for the invisible mothers. Share it for the parents who suffer in silence. And in the comments, tell me, is there someone in your life you judged too harshly? Is there someone you need to call today? Do it now, before you are left holding a watch and a box of regrets. Thank you for listening.